Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjamyari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Kacharya Shatara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Rajagranta Srimad Bhagvatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Itai Gaur Brahmanandi All glories to the Summit Devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Ajnana Timinandasya Nanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyarevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, Text 8. This is the famous one. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Jaste Jase Avira Virbhavav Brajanaka Brajadamshra Karma Shayan Randaya Tamagrasa Grasa Om Swaha Abhayam Atmani Bhuyishta Om Kram. The last sentence of the purport says, any devotee aspiring to be free of material desires should offer his respectful prayers to Nrsingadev, as Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. Just for your information, if you want to. That's, I guess, a direct instruction. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Nrsimhadev, the source of all power. O my Lord, who possesses nails and teeth, just like thunderbolts, kindly vanquish our demon-like desires for fruitive activity in this material world. Please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance, so that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence in this material world. Purport: in Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, verse 39. Sanat Kumar speaks the following words to Maharaj Prithu. Yat pada pankaja palasya vilasya bhaktya karma shayam gratitam udgratayanti santa tadvana riktamatayo yatayo pirudha sroto ganastam aranam bhajavasudevam. Quote, devotees always engaged in the service of the toes of the Lord's lotus feet can very easily become free from heart-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the jnanis and yogis cannot stop the waves of sense gratification. Although they try to do so, therefore you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. That's the end of the quote. Every living being within this material world has a strong desire to enjoy matter to his fullest satisfaction. For this purpose, the conditioned soul must accept one body after another, and thus his strongly fixed fruitive desires continue. One cannot stop the repetition of birth and death without being completely desireless. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami describes pure bhakti, devotional service, as follows: Anya bilashita shunyam, jnana karma jnanavritam, anukuliyena krishna nushilanam bhaktir uttama. Quote, one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain, through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. That's the end of the quote. Unless one is completely freed of all material desires which are caused by the dense darkness of ignorance, one cannot fully engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, we should always offer our prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, who killed Hiranyakashipu, the personification of material desire. Hiranya means gold, and Kashipu means a soft cushion or bed. Materialistic persons always desire to make the body comfortable, and for this they require huge amounts of gold. Thus, Hiranyakashipu was the perfect representative of materialistic life. He was therefore the cause of great disturbance to the topmost devotee. Prahlad Maharaj, until Lord Nrsimhadev killed him. Any devotee aspiring to be free of material desire should offer his respectful prayers to Nrsimhadev as Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya. So we're on Hari Vamsha. Prahlad Maharaj is offering prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. And he's praying for the Lord to remove his desires for fruitive activity, which is the cause of repeated birth and death and the cause of obstacles in the progress of devotional service. So Lord Nrsimhadev was called as Bhakti Vigna Vinash, one who removes the obstacles in devotional service, namely material desires, so that one can attain the lotus feet of Krishna. So material desires are, of course, a very annoying, persistent, annoying thing. It's like a kid, who's trying to get your attention. You're like trying to ignore him, and he just keeps poking your shoulder until you satisfy his request. So material desire is something like that. It just keeps poking at the living entity, and of course, it's sadhakas we're trying to resist the urge to satisfy those desires, but it's still there. That poking is still there. And so it is not astonishing that sometimes as practitioners one becomes weak and, gives a little attention to such desires and carry on. It's very persistent, very hard to give up material desire. And that's by design. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Avritam Garan Etena, Ganinas Nityaverina Kamarupena Kotaya, Dushparena and Lena Cha. That material desire or lust covers the knowledge of the soul's constitutional position. That's the first installment. The second installment is it creates a burning sensation in the heart for satisfaction. And that's the third installment, is that it can never be satisfied. So that's very annoying. There's the burning sensation in the heart, simultaneously it can't be satisfied. So naturally one tries to satisfy that to no avail. And then when one sees that he's not able to avail himself or to quell his material desires and seeing what damage it is causing, just on a practical level, what to speak on a spiritual level, then he desires to give up such material desires. which are the cause of his suffering. But then he finds himself unable to do that also. And there's a reason for that, because material desire is reinforced by something even more subtle and more powerful, as Prabhupada mentions here. What is that? What is it that material desire is reinforced by? It's more subtle and more powerful than even material desire itself. Ignorance, avidya. So sinful activity, this is what we get in the, let's say, the NOI text 1 is based on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or even 6th Canto Bhagavatam, that section. So fruit of atonement is considered useless. One does some sinful activity and atones for that sinful activity by various Vedic methods. But such atonement is considered ultimately like an elephant bath because of? What's the root of the sinful activity? The desire. Material desire is not removed. So although one, Prabhupada gives another example in Nectar Devotion, a man who has to desire, or he's performing the activity of some improper connection with women, and he gets a venereal disease from that. So he goes to the doctor, and the doctor gives him a shot to remove the disease. That's like the atonement by analogy. And then he goes back out and does the same thing over again, gets the same disease, goes back to the doctor, gets the shot, that's the atonement. So it's ultimately a waste of time because the desire has not been removed. So then once one figures that out, then, I have to attack the desire. So then one tries to attack the desire, but then and it seems like you're doing good for some time, like, okay, I'm doing good, it's going away, I'm feeling inspired, and then all of a sudden it rears its ugly head again. And that's because it's reinforced by something more subtle and powerful, and that's ignorance, avidya. And so this the sinful activity, desire, avidya is the root cause. That's what we really need to be attacking. Is exempt or personified here, embodied by the form of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu, so Kashipu means soft bed, and Hiranya means gold. So one wants to live a comfortable life, and he requires a lot of money for that, so he can enjoy to his full satisfaction. This is avidya, this is ignorance. And it's very hard to dismantle. And why is that? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Daivi Esha Gunamayi Mamamaya Dharataya. It is practically insurmountable to untie the knot. That's also being mentioned in this verse, Karmashayam. Karmashayam refers to avidya or ahankara, which is underlying our desire for material satisfaction. Gratitam ugratinyanti santa, so it's compared to a hard knot. And this knot is an interesting knot because as one performs activity in the material world, the knot thickens. That's the way it works. You can try to picture. I'm trying to create visuals because I actually have visuals for these things in my Nectar Devotion. I had a devotee make some various models. Anyway, you have a vidya on top and you have sense gratification on the bottom. You can visualize that. And then you can do the little arrows things the little arrows that connect. So ignorance leads to sense gratification or materialistic activity, and then that reinforces ignorance. And then from ignorance, more sense gratification, then more reinforced. So as the living entity performs activities in the material world, the knot, karmashayam is the word used, the knot of material desire is tightened. So practically it's unbreakable. No one can break it. And so the verse expresses here, Tadwana rikta matayo yatayo pirudha, that others who are not performing bhakti, like the gyanis and the yogis, the sannyasis and so on, those persons who aren't performing bhakti, shrotogana, they're not able to overcome the tidal wave of sense gratification, the waves of sense gratification. The idea is that the waves keep coming, That's again the same example, like the poking. So the verse is using the idea of waves. So ocean waves are very powerful, isn't it? You can easily be pulled in by the current into deeper parts of the ocean. This is a tangential point. I know that from watching Baywatch. That's just a tangential point, but there would be many episodes of a small kid, playing in the ocean water, and then his mother gets distracted talking to her girlfriend or something, And then the kid, he's just playing around in the shallow water, and all of a sudden he's getting pulled in deeper, deeper, imperceptibly. The wave hits him, and he thinks, it's all great fun, I'm just having a great time. But he's not perceiving that the waves are actually pulling him in, which every hit, he's getting pulled deeper into the ocean. And then the mother, she turns around like 10 minutes later, and her kid's like all the way out there, dying. And then the lifeguards have to come to the rescue. And that's exactly how material desire is, in fact. When we're thinking we're in shallow ground, that we're okay. Actually, unless you're out of the water of material existence, you're in a dangerous situation. But one may feel himself a little bit secure. And then what happens, but the waves of sense gratification keep coming. And so they imperceptibly drag the living entity further and further into material existence until he's just drowning in an ocean of material desire and sinful activity and so on. And it's generally imperceptible. You don't see that that's happening until it's too late. Therefore, Prabhupada said the disease of the Western mind, the Western mind refers to the whole world, of course, but the disease of the Western mind is that we have a tendency to flirt with Maya. Or you can say the tendency to think that we're okay, we're secure. Especially once we got a little practice going on, we got a little regulation, and we feel kind of secure, maybe a little insecure, but mostly secure. Then that confidence comes. And Maya always likes those ones the best. Oh, they think they can't get caught, huh? I like the challenge. And she does the same tricks like I was mentioning the other day in class. No new tricks, and then just keep it coming. Just keep it coming. It may not be working for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, but the desires are there, and they imperceptibly pulling the living entity deeper into the ocean of material existence. So tadwana riktamatayo yatayo pirudha shrotoganas. So those gyanis who don't have the strength of the spiritual strength that is gained from bhakti, they cannot overcome the waves of sense gratification, which eventually engages them in relationship to matter. And therefore, the Kumars are telling Prithu Maharaj, Tam Aranam Bhaja Vasudeva, and therefore you should worship Lord Vasudeva. Why you should worship Lord Vasudeva? Yapada Pankaja Palasya Vilasya Bhaktya. Because by rendering service to the lotus toes of Krishna, by bhakti to the lotus toes of Krishna, which performs wonderful pastimes. Pada Pankaja Palasya Vilasa. Vilasa means pastimes. So by bhakti to the lotus toes of Krishna, who performs wonderful pastimes, one gains the spiritual strength to overcome Maya. A very simple point. To cut karmashayam gratitam ugratinyanti, to cut the hard knot, which is the source of the material desires, the source of the sinful activity. To cut that knot which has been tightened very tight because of ignorant activities from time immemorial. It's very tight. Therefore, the Gyanis and Yogi, they can't cut it. So although they burn their material desires, they again come up, again coming up, because the knot is still there, it's strong. But the devotee who is engaged in bhakti to the lotus toes of Krishna, which performs wonderful pastimes. And this bhakti, the word bhakti in the verse, means from bhakti, starting from sadhana bhakti, all the way culminating in sadhya bhakti, or perfectional state. Then they're able to cut that knot and gain the spiritual strength by which they can overcome the influence of the material energy, which is dharatya, very hard to surmount. One requires spiritual strength. The living entity himself is too small to actually challenge the material nature. He's too easily bewildered. So in order to remain unbewildered while existing in this material world, it requires spiritual strength. So that spiritual strength, of course, comes from Krishna. It doesn't come from the living entity. And it is that, this is the language used in Nectar of Devotion, introduction. It is a spiritual strength coming from Krishna invested into the living entity that allows him to overcome the influence of Maya. So this is a very important point. I was reading a very nice analogy of this. When you stick an iron rod in fire, isn't it? Then it takes on the quality of fire. We've heard this analogy many times before, right? And then when you take that iron rod and touch it to like a piece of cloth, what happens? It sets it on fire. Now what burns the cloth? The fire burns the cloth, not the iron rod, right? The iron rod doesn't have any inherent quality to burn the cloth. So it's the fire that is actually burning the cloth, isn't it? So that fire came from where? The original fire, isn't it? You understand? So similarly, the living entity has no inherent strength to actually tackle the material energy, nor does he have any inherent strength to practice spiritual life. The strength to practice spiritual life is coming from the fire of Krishna, if you will, and it's invested into the living entity, and that's why he gets the strength to practice and the strength to overcome the material energy progressively. And how does that investment come to the living entity? Through Guru, through Sadhu Guru. That's how that investment is coming. So Bhaktya Kayesham Guru Deva Tatman, that's where the verse says, by exclusive bhakti to Krishna, understanding one's Guru to be the worshipable deity, a manifestation of Krishna. He has to be a manifestation of Krishna in order to make such an investment in the living entity. If he has no bhakti, then how he will make that investment in you? You will get no spiritual strength. So the Guru is necessarily a manifestation of Krishna to invest within the living entity the spiritual strength, which has its seed called as Shraddha. That seed is also the investment of the spiritual energy. That's the first investment. It's called Shraddha. Shraddha, faith in God and so on. This is a spiritual investment given by the Guru to the disciple, and that gives him the strength to practice spiritual life and to overcome the influence of the heart, not of material desires. Otherwise, we have no inherent power to actually challenge material desires. Sometimes, and so then when persons lose that connection, it's just like if an investor pulls out, someone who's invested into your business, and so things are going good, but then he pulls his investment out as such, then your business collapses and so on. So similarly, if one loses his connection with Sadhu Guru, if he loses his connection, he loses that investment that is coming from the spiritual energy into oneself. And in that way, all of a sudden his spiritual life is on a decline. People have this experience repeatedly. Because, in other words, it appears that our ability to practice is coming from us. That's kind of the trick of the thing. And Narada Muni says in Bhagavatam that let them think that way because that gives them inspiration. But as I become more edified in understanding what's going on, it's really actually just Krishna's kindness upon us coming through a devotee that's allowing us to do anything at all. But Narada Muni says, let them think that way, that gives them inspiration, they're doing something for Krishna. And as they get more edified, they understand really it's all just Krishna. Krishna really is doing everything through his various energies. And one such pastime that he performs is allowing us to come out of Maya by investing within us his own spiritual energy, called as the Bhakti Shakti or Swarupa Shakti. And that investment comes from the spiritual master. So, because just like in the beginning, a businessman make an initial investment, and then he has to continue to invest in order for the business to grow. So also Gurudev makes the initial investment, Bhakti Lata Bija, in the form of Shraddha. And then continual investments have to be made. And sometimes the same Guru gives the investment for further progress, and sometimes there are other Gurus, they're called as Shiksha Gurus. They also give investments in the form of Shiksha. They also give investments, and that allows the Shraddha to grow all the way to penetrating the material world. This description is given. You know this description from CC, how the creeper grows through the material world, all the way up to the topmost planet and penetrates the Brahman Jyoti and goes past the Brahman Jyoti into the Vaikuntha worlds and all the way up to the Goloka Vrindavan planet, takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. This description is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The idea of this is that the creeper of desire is penetrating the three worlds and entering to the spiritual world until it takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. In other words, the creeper of desire is usually impeded by material existence. It's growing, it's like, oh, what is this? That looks kind of interesting. Oh, what is this? It's like we hear sometimes, I think in the second canto, of certain yogis who take a gradual method of going back home to the spiritual world. When they're leaving their bodies, they can see different planetary systems and what's going on there. And some of these yogis might, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting, what's going on over there, And, oh, that one looks kind of cool. And they kind of take a little pause for a second on the path of liberation. Let's pause for a moment. That one looks like a little fun, And then they check out that planet. So the idea of this analogy of the creeper of devotion given in CC is that the creeper of desire is penetrating the three worlds. Bhuva is penetrating the three worlds, penetrating the Brahman Jyoti, so going past bhukti, going past the desire for mukti, taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. and then begins there producing fruits in the form of love of God. And that love of God is the full manifestation of the investment given by Guru in the beginning as Shraddha. It's the full investment of that manifests as pure bhakti. Anya bilashita shunyam and ankramadya navritam anukuyena Krishna. Pure bhakti with no question of desire for, no question of material desire, no covering of gyan or karma, and fully favorably disposed towards Krishna, constantly performing activities for his pleasure. Anyway, this is prema. This verse, of course, doesn't apply just to prema, but this is pure love, which is the full manifestation of the investment made by the Guru in the beginning that allows for one to overcome the influence of material desire. Otherwise, there's no question of getting out of that. So then here in this verse, Prahlad Maharaj is simply praying to Lord Nrsingadev. He's Bhakti Vigna Vinash, that I have these material desires, they're impeding not only are they the cause of repeated birth and death, but they're the cause of slow progress in bhakti. Therefore, if you can remove such obstacles, generally for Krishna Bhaktas, Lord Govinda is the Ishta Devata, especially of Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Prabhupada says in several places in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, 1865 is a famous place. Another place is, I think, 815, or not 815, 913 in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that one should not even think of other forms of Godhead. Only Krishna, one should not even, how does he say, distract himself? I forget the language she uses exactly. Anyway, don't even worry about thinking about other forms of Godhead. And Prabhupada quote, Nrsingadev, Varahadev, Lord Ramchandra, only Krishna, that form standing before Arjuna holding a flute. Now, of course, Krishna was not holding a flute when he was standing before Arjuna, but we can get the idea that Prabhupada is saying we should think only of Lord Govinda and Vrindavan, Brajanandana Krishna, Brajendranandana Krishna. But we do worship Lord Nrsingadev every day. And it's also significant that we do so before we worship Tulsi. That before worshiping Tulsi, we actually worship Lord Nrsingadev. And the simple point is that because we are clouded by obstacles in devotional service, our hearts are very nasty. And there is like a whole bunch of Hiranyakashipus in there having a get-together, a dance party, and they're just killing us, It's just this dance party. It's like a club. Our heart is like a nightclub, and everyone's entering the nightclub. All these Hiranyakashipus, and they're doing a killer piece. It's killing our spiritual life. So one prays for the mercy of Lord Nrsingadev to come into the nightclub. And all the Nrsingadevs start running as the Nrsingadev starts killing them off, And then our heart becomes a purified seat to invite Krishna to, okay, welcome to my place. It's been cleared out very effectively by Lord Nrsingadev. Of course, we don't want to, the idea here is not that, am I just worshiping Lord Nrsingadev and as a means to an end and then I kick him out? It is actually Krishna that you're worshiping, but you're calling upon this particular feature of Krishna, seeking his mercy to remove such material desires. In fact, Prahlad Maharaj was a devotee of Lord Govinda also. FYI, he was not a devotee of Lord Nrsingadev as such. If you read the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj carefully, you'll see all the verses preceding the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev speak about Govinda and how Govinda embraced the body of Prahlad, therefore he was protected from his father. You have other verses which describes, I have some notes, all the sections where this is mentioned, or how he prayed to Lord Vasudeva and so he's actually a devotee of Lord Govinda. And then Lord Govinda, Krishna, manifested this particular feature in the pastime for removing the obstacle. So also it is not that it's a fruit of, okay, I'm just worshiping the Nrsingadev so I can get something better. I'm worshiping my same beloved Lord, Krishna, but I'm calling upon this feature of his munificence to remove a very big obstacle in my budding desire to serve him. In that way, Prabhupada, in support by saying we can pray to the Lord like Prahlad prayed in this verse, and seeking that mercy to get the spiritual strength and to grow the initial investment given to us by Guru, to grow it so we can attain the lotus feet of Krishna like this. So that would be my discussion. Are there any questions, comments? Yeah.
I remember one regarding the desire, His Holiness Romabad Maharaj, once he told me, you should watch your desire. So very nice one, that is, we have to watch our desire every moment. And also, recently I studied that in purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned, when we die, that time our physical body is disappeared, but subtle body still remains if you have desire. If you have desireless, when your desire is zero, then everything is finished. Then or else you will continue to birth, take birth again and again. And recently also that in Krishna book also it is stated that Krishna book, yeah, I think, desire, regarding the desire, what is that? I forgot something about desire. So how Krishna is showing, the next Vaikuntha planet to all the inhabitants of Raja, and in that topics, there is a very nice point regarding the desire. Yeah. So when you will have no desire, then only you can enter in Krishna's family, means Krishna's dynasty. And then you will be situated in transcendental platform. When you won't have any material desires.
Yeah, that's what Prabhupada said here also.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, thank you for your class. I have two questions. My first question has to do with this point you were making that the neophytes, they are under the misconception that their ability to practice is coming from themselves. And when they make sufficient advancement, they realize that actually the source of my nourishment
Means ability means the strength to practice.
Right. So then you quickly kind of made a point about how we cut ourselves off from that source, and then you moved on to your next point, but I wanted to, if you could speak a little bit more about that point, about how we cut ourselves off.
No, I described it sufficiently. I said, because the initial investment is coming from the Guru, that's where the spiritual strength is coming from Krishna, through Parampara, through our Guru, and invested into us. And then I said, and I described it. I said, just as if the investor pulls out, then your business is not able to sustain. So similarly, if we are disconnected from that relationship, that investment withdrawn, then we find ourselves not having the strength to continue on in practice. And therefore, how important it is to properly maintain the relationship, because that's the initial investor. And then I described how there may become other investors along the way, called the Shiksha Gurus, and so I described it.
Apologize, I should have paid more attention. The second question is, I was just thinking about the pastime in the Krishna book when the forest fire attacks the residents of Vrindavan, and their first reaction is to call out to Krishna to save them. And like that we see so many instances. So what's the difference between their calling out, because you were explaining how we're praying to Nrsingadev, we're still the same Lord, but we're calling out to this particular feature of Nrsingadev to remove these material desires from our heart. But then we see the example in the Krishna book how they would just call out to Krishna, they wouldn't call out to any of the features. So
No, but they're not calling out to Krishna to remove material desires, of course. That's a pretty big difference. They have no material desires, we do. And that's the intrinsic nature of the soul, to call out to God for everything. So it's not like they only call out to God for, oh, I'm in trouble, Krishna. But they're constantly calling out to God. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, etc. These are the eternal activities of the spiritual world. And their secondary function in the material world is that they deliver souls back to Godhead. But that's a secondary function. Their primary function is the activity itself of hearing, chanting, and remembering, because it's an eternal activity. They're always doing that. And when these activities of devotional service are gifted to the souls in this material world, then their secondary function is that it delivers us to the lotus feet of Krishna. And then once we're delivered to the lotus feet of Krishna, the primary function functions. And what is that primary function? The activity itself of hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna. So it is only natural that they're calling out to Krishna, but not only when they're in trouble, but always as an internal function like that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, bro. I was just thinking in this connection, we hear that the process of bhakti is like a process of surrender. And because you were discussing how our strength to practice is coming not from within actually, but is like a gift. And then there's also, I was thinking of the verse from Queen Kunti, Niskinchananam, the devotees who have realized that they have no asset really, that everything is given to them by Krishna. And so they're very humble. And then they can really call out and reciprocate, and then Krishna reciprocates. It's interesting, because it is very, then still even in the practice of bhakti, because we're under the influence of the illusory energy, it appears as though we are doing these, I am the cause of my progress in bhakti. But
Yeah, therefore the tendency to disconnect ourselves with the actual sources of our strength.
Yeah.
Because I'm the doer. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm fixing chanting the holy names, I know so much. All right, Guru Maharaj, it's nice knowing you. You're a good guy, no doubt about it. And that Mayavada tendency, as Prabhupada speaks about, where, Prabhupada says that, the Guru helps you get out, and then as soon as you get on, you push the Guru away, So like that's tendency strong, because we think we're the doers. So, but we don't realize that we could never practice. Actually, if you think about it, it's actually completely impossible. Following 4 regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds. Chanting 16 rounds, I remember when I first started chanting, I was like, how the hell does anyone chant 16 rounds? I was like, this is impossible. My first round, I remember, it took me about 25 minutes, because how you didn't know how to really do it, and you're like, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And I remember I would chant while walking from my home to downtown Evanston, which was about a 25 minute walk. And it would take me the whole time to chant 1 round. So I was like, 16 rounds? That makes people crazy. How did they get life for other things? And of course, we tell people about like Haridas Thakur's example, and so it's like, this is impossible. And the reality is that it is impossible. And in fact, the real standard of devotion is like a constant flow of love towards Krishna, non-stop. And the example Baladevi Debhushana gives in Bhagavad Gita is just like pouring honey out of a bottle. So when you pour honey out of the bottle, there's no breakage in the honey. It's just an unending stream of honey coming out, unlike other substances which may break every now and again. So in the same way, our love should be going towards Krishna, and you hear that's impossible. All these material desires going in the heart is impossible. And which is reality, that's true. It's impossible on our own, of course, but if we do get an investment from Krishna through his investors, the pure devotees of the Lord, then all becomes possible. But sometimes we do forget about that, so therefore we're supposed to hear about it regularly, just to revive the remembrance of the soul. How is it that you're here? Why are you here? And so on. It's not because you're your mode of goodness or your good qualities or this, that, and the other. It's actually because of mercy. Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jaya. It's not a concept.